This is Armenia Unlocked, a weekly edition from CivilNet with your host and executive producer, Vardan Petrosyan.
Welcome to Armenia Unlocked. Sounds of gunfire and mortar shells continue to be heard from the border towns and villages in Tavush Province in Armenia's northeast. The clashes that began on July 12 have now escalated to tank and drone strikes. And with Azerbaijan's use of Israeli-built combat drones, this is now the most extensive fighting since the April War of 2016. These latest moves are a continuation of the efforts by both sides to improve their positions on the border between the two countries, particularly in the mountainous areas of Tavush in Armenia's northeast. For more on this, we're joined by Emil Sanamyan in Washington, D.C. Emil is a specialist on the South Caucasus and is the editor of the Focus on Karabakh platform at the University of Southern California's Institute of Armenian Studies. Emil, I want to start with this. Why are the clashes taking place on the Armenia-Azerbaijan border in the north and not on the line of contact between Karabakh and Azerbaijan this time?
If we look back at the last couple of decades, we've had similar incidents on a smaller scale mostly, but similar incidents both on Armenia-Azerbaijan stretches and particularly in Tavush and also in Artsakh. The confusion is, of course, most people think that the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict is focused on Karabakh, which it is focused on Karabakh, but it's not exclusively focused on Karabakh or Artsakh. There is also fighting occasional, and in the past, in the 90s, also there was major fighting on Armenian-Azerbaijani border as well. And there was actually some confusion. I saw a statement by a Latvian foreign ministry talking about their concern over the situation in Tavush region of Nagorno-Karabakh when that went out. But the reality is, in the past number of years, Tavush especially has been one of the major hotspots between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And this particular situation evolved locally, and it's still a very local situation, local to the Shamshadin Bert area of Tavush, not the entire Tavush region. And hopefully it will remain contained in that area. But of course, it's a dangerous situation. And today we saw some developments that are very concerning.
Does the fact that the distance between the opposing armies is far smaller on Armenia-Azerbaijan border than between Karabakh and Azerbaijan, does that matter? And also the fact that the border is not as strongly protected on both sides as in Karabakh and Azerbaijan, do those things matter?
Well, it depends on which individual segment are we talking about. There are some places in Artsakh where forces are very close together, sometimes less than 100 meters apart. So it can be less than 100 meters, but still, depending on what the orders are, the ceasefire can be maintained. What's the real difference between Tavush and Artsakh is that in Tavush we have a number of Armenian villages that are very close to the Azerbaijani forces. So Azerbaijani forces can fire into Armenian villages even from light arms. There are no Armenian villages that close on the Artsakh section. The closest we have is Talish and Madahis, which are only a couple of kilometers away each, but it's still a couple of kilometers, so they're out of light arms fire. But we have villages like Chinari and Mofses, and further up Nerkin Karmi Rakhpur and others that are very close to Azerbaijani positions. Mm-hmm. In this particular case, the fighting is actually focused on the height that's located between the villages of Mofses and Chinari in that area, that area of Tavush. In part, the focus is there because Armenian forces are trying to get the high ground to make sure that they're better protecting the villages of Mofses, specifically in this case, the village of Mofses. And Azerbaijani forces are trying to retain the control of that high ground that they've had for the past couple of decades.
Mm-hmm. Armenia repeats that it will guarantee the peace in Karabakh. Does that make it vulnerable to these types of attacks? Does it make it more vulnerable, I guess?
As long as there is no peace agreement with Azerbaijan, the vulnerability was always going to be there. And even with the peace agreement, that does not remove the security concerns altogether. We've seen, conflicts that are long-term conflicts, such as the Arab-Israeli conflict, that have had peace agreements, but recurrence of some kind of warfare. So, in the case of Armenia and Azerbaijan, unfortunately, we can speak of a very long-duration conflict, and unless there is a hegemon emerging in that part of the world, and sort of the parties lose their sovereignty, Armenia and Azerbaijan lose their sovereignty, then you can think of sort of more of a permanent agreement, permanent peace taking place, as just was the case in the Soviet period or in the Russian imperial period. But at this point, as long as Armenia and Azerbaijan remain independent states, most likely we will have some form of confrontation happening. It could be high-intensity confrontation, just as we saw in the last couple of days or in April 2016, or it could be lower intensity confrontation, just as we see it almost every day in the form of statements, in the form of blockades, in the form of economic pressure.
Mm-hmm. In the last 24 hours, Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev fired his foreign minister, who held the position for over a decade. Why did he do this, and what does this mean for future diplomatic talks, considering that he was more or less the only one involved in this in the Azerbaijani government?
The way the system works in Azerbaijan is, these positions are held by people of trust. The president trusts, are loyal to the president, and Elmar Mamediyarov was a close associate of Ilham Aliyev for a long time. Actually, he's been a foreign minister for 17 years, ever since Ilham Aliyev became president. And they had a friendly relationship, and it seems like Ilham Aliyev sort of dumping Mamediyarov to deflect pressure from himself and blame Mamediyarov and actually blame the diplomatic core of Azerbaijan. Today, he made statements to the effect that diplomats working abroad at different embassies of Azerbaijan are traitors, that they're actually working for the governments where they're posted. It just tells me that the position Ilham Aliyev is in terms of mental position, in terms of political position, is not a very sound one right now. Obviously, his statements cannot help him.
This wave of fighting has not stopped yet. What can we expect in the next few days?
Well, we've had a very concerning set of statements today. First of all, Azerbaijani Defense Ministry spokesman threatened to strike at the Armenian nuclear power plant. I mean, that kind of a threat, while it seems a very remote possibility, even in the perspective of Azerbaijani reality, but it should be taken as a credible threat, because Azerbaijan is in the possession of certain missile systems supplied to it by Israel that can reach and target the Midsummer nuclear power plant, maybe potentially cause a radiation leak there. I think that is a very concerning statement. I think it probably behooved the Armenian government to raise the statement with all its international partners and Permanent Five at the United Nations Security Council, because this sort of threats against nuclear energy are threats that international community takes seriously. And I would expect for them to take this seriously. That was one. And another one, we've had statements by Defense Minister of Turkey, Hulusi Akar. For the first time, I think, since Turgut Özal back in 1993 threatened to take military action against Armenia, Defense Minister Akar made statements that could be construed as a military threat against Armenia. And we've had the statement was made as Azerbaijani military delegation was sent to Ankara to meet with Akar. And they've had a conversation during which Akar made those statements, and it appears that Turkey has drawn some military assets towards Armenia's border, particularly spy planes that are flying along Armenia's border. There are, of course, military units based very close to the Armenian border, and the nuclear power plant is very close to the Armenian border. So I think it's a very concerning situation with those threats emanating from Azerbaijan and from Turkey. And I think Armenian government needs to step up its diplomatic effort, and other countries of the region probably should take notice as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks very much, Amir.
You're welcome.
And thank you for listening to this edition of Armenia Unlocked. And for much more, follow CivilNet on Twitter, Facebook, and at civilnet.am. My name is Vardan Petrosyan. You've been enjoying Beirut's music, and special thanks to our podcast producer, Sarin Habesyan.